In this tutorial, we're going to cover making topography and working on a site. So establishing your project. So the first thing you'll probably receive is a drawings from a surveyor, which I'll open. So this is a typical drawing that you receive from a surveyor. Okay, so it's drawn in a certain geographical system, which they usually specify, and they also specify where they measure from. So these are like station points where they surveyed this property from. So what do they give us? The surveyor gives us the site boundaries, okay, which is very critical. He will pick up certain servitudes if required. So here you can see there's a power line that runs here. So there's a servitude when there's a power line. But generally, he's going to give you the roads. He's going to give you the sites boundaries. Okay, the site boundaries, and of course the contours, which is very important. So for this exercise, initially all you want to do is you want to gather all the site information, okay? So the cadastral information, and you want to gather the topography, because the topography is what you're going to use to then model your 3D topography in Revit, and this is a great place to start. So generally, just note that these drawings are in meters. So if I took a quick dimension, those are 50-meter grids, okay? And if I went to my 3D view, you'll notice that this drawing is not flat. And we had discussed this in the past where from time to time you will work on drawings that are not totally flat. But what this does give us, which is important, it gives us the contours in 3D. There's two methods of doing this. The other method is when you work and you trace the contours, but we'll cover that. There's a separate video that I'll link. Okay, so this is our AutoCAD drawing that we're going to be using for this exercise. Okay. So in Revit, you're going to start a new project. So you start your new project, browse, and you're going to go and start your project using the Form C template. Okay, so open this up, press OK, and go to your site view. Okay, this is critical. You want to do all this work in your site view because it gives you the project base point and a project survey point. Okay, so I'll explain the difference between these two in a different video. I'll open up some other files where you can kind of see the difference. Okay, but in essence, the project base point is critical for your building, but the survey point is a point that you, so the triangle shape, the survey point is what all your sub-consultants will share. So the civil engineer, the structural engineer, okay. So the survey point is more critical when it comes to sharing information, but the project base point is like your origin of your drawing is which you want to try and work around. Okay. So your project base point is critical when you want to start doing a building, and you always try and work around your project base point. Your survey point doesn't really matter. You can move it around, and I'll explain that in a bit depth. If I grab the survey point, for example, I'll move it away. If I go back to project point, you see that it's always trying to reference this point. Okay. You can see every time I move it, so the survey point is essence where this building is set out in relation to the survey point. So the survey point, you could see it as an AutoCAD file. You could see that as one of your benchmark coordinates. Okay, but you must take a note of this so that you can share this with your other consultants. Okay, and you can see they label those pegs BM. Here they are. So this is survey point 1. It's where they surveyed from. Okay, so close that for now. No. Okay, for this exercise, I want to move this back to my origin. So you're just going to use the move tool, and it should snap right in the middle, and I'm going to snap it right back to the origin. So if I go back to my project base point, everything's back to 0. Okay. So the first thing you want to do in the site plan is you want to insert. So you never import these drawings. So you say import CAD, okay, and you're going to go and find this file. Okay, I'll give this file as a sample so you can experiment making it. Just remember, you need to set your units. Usually by default it's set at automated detect, but you're going to change it for meters. And for this exercise, because I know that this drawing is very far from the origin, I'm going to use manual center. Okay, so what it does is it tries to find the center of the information it's drawing to give me a point to work with. If I press open now, you'll notice now that it's trying to find the center of this drawing somehow, but that's fine. I'm going to move it to here, and I'm going to find, so this grid, if you see these grids here, I'm going to use one of these grids, the intersection of these grids, to be the origin of, be my setting out point for this project. Okay, so just bear in mind, here's using this system, and this grid will help you, the Y and the X will help you pick a point. All you have to tell the engineer and all the civil guys is this is the point I'm using, for example. So I'm going to use this intersection over here as my origin. Okay, so I'm going to grab this information, press move, and you're going to select the intersection with this intersect. Okay, this is strictly inaccurate a bit because it's, I'll explain this as well, because from the 3D view, you notice this thing is very high and very far from the origin. Technically, this is 1,400 meters above sea level, so it'll be very far from the origin. So Revit's always trying to work as close to the origin as possible to eliminate inaccuracies, which you'll see a little. But for the sake of this exercise, all we're going to understand is this is going to be our origin. Okay, and now we need to create our topography. Okay, so if we go to massing and site, so all our massing and site tools live in here. So site furniture like trees and that you can put here, parking elements. So here you can kind of see site elements, certain putting trees in that on the site, parking elements, and property boundaries, which are your cadastral lines. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use topography. Okay, I want to say create topography from imported instance. So I'm going to select the file. Now you notice in this drawing there are two layers, which we let's cancel this quickly now. I'll demonstrate this. So all I want to use to create my topography are these contour lines. And if you click on the drawing and in the modifier section you go to inquiry, it'll tell you what that contour's name is. So that's contour G, contour 1. Okay, and press inquiry again and click the purple one because that's my major contour. So those are the two elements in that drawing that I want to use. Those two lines or layers in essence. So massing and site, topography. So create from imported object. Select imported object. Okay, so I'm going to say check none. All I want is that one and that one. Okay, press OK. Okay, and finish. Now if I go to 3D view, you'll see now that it's created a topography that perfectly matches that import AutoCAD file. But just bear in mind you're very far from your origin, which we'll fix now. Okay, but in essence, that's my site and it's been modeled correctly because the contour information I've been given is quite accurate. Okay, so I'm going to select the drawing information and hide that for time being, hide elements. Okay, the next thing we need to set up is we need to set up how our contour lines work. So you can just go and set it at 500 intervals. 500 intervals here. Enter. So those would be 500 millimeter intervals, or the way we tend to do it is we're going to use this primary. So we're going to set this as our primary is at 1,000 meters, okay, for this exercise. But different sites you might want to set that at 500, and then your secondaries. So here I can say insert again. And let me just say delete. So let's just say I want to say insert beneath. Okay. Okay, let me just undo that. Cancel massing and site. Okay, so I want to keep this information. That's very important. So let's make this my secondary contour for now. Make this 500. Okay, I'm going to insert a new one. Okay, this will also be multiple values. And I'm going to set the subcategory to be primary. So secondary contours and primary contours. Okay, and that's what the AutoCAD drawing was doing as well. Okay. So primary contours I'm going to set at meter intervals, and then secondaries I'll set at 500. You can go and change this to 250, for example, but I'll show you the difference now. But in essence, all you have to do is this value already, you can just copy this value, Control C, and you paste it. So it's just where these contours start and stop. Okay, I can switch this top one off because I don't need that anymore. Press apply. Okay, you might have to introduce a 9 here to make this work correctly, because it's got to do with the heights of the contours above sea level. But in essence, that will sort out this issue. Press apply. So primary and secondary. So if I switch on my line weights now, if you zoom in, we'll sort out which ones are primaries, which ones are secondary in a minute. I'll use a color to show the difference. So my primary contours are, let's change this around. So let's make this my primaries. Make that 1000, make my secondaries, and make them 250 or 500 for now. Press apply. Okay, press OK. I'm going to go to, you can change the scale to 1 to 1000. Now you can see where your primary contours are and where your secondary contours are. Okay, and object styles. Okay, let me just show you this. So in view, manage, you're going to go to object styles. So for this exercise, just to make it a bit clearer, I'm going to go to topography. My primary contours, I'm going to make them 5. I'm going to make them red. Just for this exercise, secondaries will be 2, and this we usually make like a dark gray. Okay. Press OK, press apply, press OK. Okay, now we've got some contours that are working correctly. Okay, so I can go back to my site view. Your site won't be visible yet because we need to change the view region of this, which we'll do in a minute. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this shaded for the time being. Okay, now I'm going to introduce the correct levels. So in essence, what's happening is if I go to our elevations, you'll see that we've got a top and cut plane. All that means is if I'm using this level, so if I'm using level 0 as my ground floor level, it means that the cut level will be where it cuts the building, and the top levels from where it looks down. Okay, so let me just quickly go through this again. So if I went to site, I went to view range. Okay, so bottom levels, you can even go and say, you can show how this works, but in essence, the cut plane levels is number 2 cut plane levels where you cut the building, and 1 is where you look down. So 1, in essence, you're looking down. Okay, so with the site plan view, it's set very differently to, so for example, a ground floor plan only works from the associated level. Okay, but with your site plan, what is very key here, you need to change this to unlimited. Okay, press apply, and you need to set your cut plane. So remember, if we look at these levels here, let's have a quick look. So I want to be above the highest level here, more or less. So that's 1, 4, and these are meters, so you need to add 3 zeros, so 1484. Okay, so if I went to V range and I said this needs to be 2000, 000, press apply. Okay, now I'm looking down at my topography. Now my topography is looking correct. Okay, I can go back to this view, and you see it follows those contour lines provided by the AutoCAD file almost exactly. The next thing we can go and do very quickly is go to massing and site. We can add some contour labels just to double check our information. I'm going to draw them. Let's draw them from the bottom here, and I'll follow this line here just to make sure. Okay, these contour lines are very small, so let's make this 1 to 500, for example. Okay, so here you can see, if I bring this to this side, I'm just going to drag them more to the edge of this drawing here, so to make sure that everything is correct. That will work for now. So you can see that's 1483. That looks correct. Okay, 1485. Okay, I think that text was in the wrong area. but you can check it in the file as well. See here, this looks correct, that looks correct, that's correct as well. Okay, that's one. We can make these labels, and let's edit this. And I'm going to change the font very quickly to Century Gothic. Century Gothic. And I'm going to change my units to meters so it starts reading correctly. So let's say meters, and I'm going to say 2 decimal places. Press OK. Apply. Okay. Okay, now that's looking a lot more accurate. Okay, let me just grab this out of the way, just make sure. Okay, 14870. Okay, great. Excellent. So now my topography is starting to read correct. The next thing I need to do is just start capturing the site information. So making up these land parcels. Okay, so now that I've got my topography in place, I've set my origin for the site in this project. The next thing I'm going to do now is start tracing the cadastral information. Okay, so for this exercise, I'm going to go to VG. I'm going to switch off topography. If you go to View, Visibility Graphics, View, Visibility Graphics, you're going to switch off your topography. You want to see that for now. And then you go to Import a Category, and I'm just going to isolate my cadastral information in this drawing file. Okay, switch everything off, click, go to Cadastral. So I'm just going to find the cadastral information. Yep, press apply. Okay, press OK. So here's my cadastral information. So I'm going to go back to massing and site. Now we're going to go and create our property lines. So I'm going to say create by sketch. Okay, here I'm literally going to snap on the ends. And how to work very fast and accurately, you just use the SE snap end tool. And each line, you're just trying to snap. SE again, you're trying to snap at each end of this line. So there's an end there, and it's important that you capture each one of these ends. I'll explain this in a later exercise. Okay, snap end. It doesn't look correct, but it's that anomaly that I was telling you about where you draw from because it's so far from the origin. Okay, now that should be a closed set of lines. And you're going to remember, you're going to use this earth information. So you just give it a name. I'll show you how to show a prefix later. 5054. Okay. And you finish your command. Okay, I'm going to go back to my site view now. So if I went to VG, Visibility Graphics, so View, Visibility Graphics, and I switch on my topography, press apply, press OK. Okay, now I've got my site boundaries. And I've got my site information. I'm just going to draw 1 or 2 more. So now this is critical. Each one of these will have its own set of boundaries because you want to give each one a different name. So massing and site. So I'm just going to go and grab another one. So create by sketch. So again, I'm going to use the snap end tool, snap end tool, snap end, snap end. Make sure that you cover all the ends. Okay. That will be a site, for example. Create similar by sketch. So snap end, 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 snap end. Finished. Okay. So now in essence, you're now creating your site boundary. Okay. So what we tend to do now is we've got our site, we've built our topography. So this is a great place to start. We're going to start looking at the massing tools, and that's in a minute. But I'm going to give you an overview of how and this site model, generally it depends how big the project is. It's either part of your model or it's a separate file that you use as a link. I'm going to show you an example where it's a separate file and it's used as a link. But if you're just working on one piece of land, there's a different technique that we'll follow, which we'll cover in another video. Okay, I'm just going to show an example of a completed site and what that looks like. Okay, so this is an example of a completed site where we've got all our buildings. So if I go to my 3D view, each one of these buildings is a separate Revit file that you link in. Okay, so each one of these buildings is a separate file which you use the site in that file again to produce your building. So in most cases, you want your site separate from your building. So you create a separate site model. So the only thing that's in the site model are all the site elements. So like its gates, the walls that make up the site, the parkings, for example, all those kind of things. Okay, so these split surfaces and all those they're all part of the topography. Okay. So these buildings are linked in, and I will create all the pads and information in this topography. So let's take a deeper look at what's going on here. So if I went to VG, Revit links, I'm going to switch off all these links so you can see. So in essence, my file is a series of walls and a series of pads. Okay. So the topography, etc. Okay, so I'm just going to show you. There's also, just bear in mind that we've used a series of existing sites. I've used phases, which is not really that critical for now. But in essence, I'm just going to use this to show all, show complete. Okay, so here I've used a show new. So here I've used, this won't be relevant to you, but we use filters to phase how things work and who owns what phase, for example. Okay, you can use design options to distinguish between the two, but in essence, this is how you would create your site. I'm just going to talk about some of the other items that we will touch on in this view. Okay, so I'm just going to Okay, so what I did in this project is I created all the site information. I cut in where the buildings go by using pads. So here I've used building pads. Okay. So for example, here I've used building pads. Yes, I've used a mass region to create my road. So let's go through some of the tools. If I went to massing and site, once you have a topography in place, you can use a subregions to create like your road outlines, for example. So for example, if I wanted to show like a parking area over here or a footpath, for example, I'm just going to use a rectangle for this exercise. So say now this was my parkade. And it must be created in the same phase. My apologies. So let me just do this again. I'm going to say new construction. I'm going to say new construction. And I'm just going to create my rectangle now. Okay, it should not have done that. I just had to fix something very quickly. Okay, so in essence, if I wanted to create, so this is a sub-region that I've used to produce the roads and all the tarmac. So for example, I wanted to produce something similar over here. I would go to sub-region. Okay, I'm going to create a rectangle. And then finish the command. So you could make that sub-region. So if I click on the sub-region, you can give this a different material like tarmac or earth. So for example, here you can see how I've used this to kind of indicate the roads. Look, there's a lot of detail work that you will do in the site plan view itself, but here I've used a sub-region to denote where this would become a parking area or part of the road. So this is purely just a sub-region that I've created. Okay, the next set of tools we're going to look at, so let me just tab until I select the sub-region, get rid of that. Okay, so for example, if I went to edit boundary, I can delete some of this information and just use a trim tool to denote my parking area, for example, finish, and there amended my parking area. Okay. Okay, the next tool we're going to look at is building pads. So these are essence where this is the finished building pad where the building will sit on. So your surface bed will, in essence, this is your fill layer. Your surface bed will fit above this pad, for example. So all that a pad is, if I went to building pad at the top here, and I went to top view, right, and say now I want to put a new building in this area over here, so I can use a pick line tool. Okay, so I'm just going to draw a line with this. So for example, I want to draw a building over here. Okay, line again. It should be square, and then trim. Okay, so now I want to put a new building over here. I'm going to finish command. Now, with the building pad, you need to work out. See here, I've used special levels for each building pad. But in essence, if I set it to 0, it will make a massive hole right down till it reaches sea level. Okay, so this building pad, you need to be very specific. So this building pad, for example, needs to be 1,860, for example, 000 above ground floor level. Okay, that's still too low. So I'm going to select this guy again. So this needs to be height offset, so 1650000. Enter. Oh, there we go. Almost correct. It's too high now. Select this. This needs to be 1650. Okay, I think it was 14000. Okay, we're almost there. Let's make this 80. I think it was 80000. Enter. Okay, in essence, so all that I'm trying to do is work out that this starts on the correct. Okay, and this all comes down to getting your site, knowing your site well. All right, so if I went to my site plan, for example, okay, so this, in essence, this is a completed site. But here we once again, we've used filled regions, and we've used, so every time we have a new building, I've got a filled region to donate what the original building is. And here I put in all my parking symbols, for example. Okay, but in essence, so this building pad, I'm going to look at one of these contours, for example. Let's go to this one. So you need to determine where, on which boundary or what contour line you want to start building your building from. Okay, so that's critical to understand how this relates to your topography information. So all of these buildings have been preset in a certain way so that they work with the topography, because you don't want to cut too much out of the site. So these, you can see they are raised slightly, but they're in line with this hard standing area in the front. Likewise, so these two pads will step in relation to each other. Okay, this building needs a basement to provide adequate parking, so that's been dropped into the site again. Likewise with this. So all that you're using these pads for is to to make a base from which your building needs to work from. Okay, so maybe that needs to be, let's maybe make that 9. Okay, oh, that's still a bit too high. Make this 000. Oh, one more 0. Okay, so in essence, you need to find, you don't want to cut or fill too much of your site. So you're just trying to find a good level for your building to sit on. Okay, so let me delete this. It'll get rid of the topography around there. So I've used the surveyor's information to give me the site information. Then I'm using these pads to kind of where my building sits so that my building's in the correct orientation. I'm just going to say view, I'm going to reinsert. So VG, I'm going to bring back those link files. Okay, and then we can use, I'm just going to use a section box very quickly to kind of run through. So each one of these buildings is its own separate Revit file. I use the site information as a link so that when I'm busy working in these buildings, I can get the stairs correct, I can get the ramps at the right level, for example. Okay, I can then make sure that my basement's at the correct level so that these meet correctly. Okay, so in essence, if I grab a section box very quickly and I start cutting through this, you start seeing I start getting the correct. So I'm not cutting too much in the sites, I'm not filling too much. So the idea with trying to put these buildings on your site is so that you can get good information, okay? And you're not going to cut too much of a site, or you're not filling too much of a site. So ideally you want to try and keep a the same ratio between cut and fill. Okay. So in a nutshell, that's how you start working with, start using, if you've got AutoCAD information, you've got contour information, that's how you start building your topography. Okay. So in essence, all I've done here, okay, we can talk about, let me just go back there a bit. So if I go back to my site view, okay, so these are two separate site plans. So this was a different site here. So here we're showing existing buildings, and this is the site that we're dealing with, for example. Okay, this is the level of information that you need to provide on a site plan. You need to give its areas, what earth it is, what it belongs to, for example, how many parking bays you're going to have, okay, how the site works. Okay, very, very important. Here you can see my site boundary line, which is the property line that I created, and I've created property lines for each one of these sites. So each one of these sites has property lines around it, its own complete closed loop. Then each building will have a building line. So this is the line to which the buildings can be built from. So you can't build any building beyond this point. Okay. So here a staircase is fine, provided that the building as a whole doesn't. So a staircase is fine, but not your building. So here we've got a building line, a 5 or 4.5 meter building line. This is critical once again. Here I'm showing some paving around the building, so that once again just a filled region. Okay, these are all just different line works showing you where your different services come into the site, for example. Here we've got we should have a servitude over here. So here we've got a servitude where you can't build, so you can't build anything in this area here. That's a special zone. And here you can see is another servitude line running here, 30-meter servitude line. So it means that you can't build anything in this part of the site because there's a power line running through your site. Okay. Okay, but in essence, I've just used massing and site. Let's go back to massing and site. I've just used subregions to create the road information. So if I quickly switch on shader view, so should work. Let me just go back to this one, for example. I'll change this to, okay. So all I've done is I've just used subregions to create the roads and the parking islands, for example. And then just remember these buildings are separate building elements. They different Revit files that I've linked in. Okay, I'll go to this section, for example. So here we use these levels for all the different building pads and etc. So we can set up our site correct, and you see this is on the correct site. Anyway, in a nutshell, that's an introduction into building a site topography. In the next video, we're going to cover using a scanned-in image and creating a site that is, so for example, if this was your building, you could actually combine the site and the model in one. But if you've got multiple buildings on a site, it's advised that each building has its own Revit model, okay, each project file, and then you link them together to create an overall plan. So here in this site file is where I produce my site plan information, but my actual building plans for that building, for each building, will be in its own Revit file, for example. All right, I hope this has helped.